It has been 10 years since Ponyville was founded by the Apple family, and even during that time, the small community has started slowly to grow, and ponies for all around the kingdom had moved to Ponyville. Soon there was a store, a bank, a train station, and the Apple family was really happy that they had been helped to build a new settlement. One day, where Granny Smith gave it a task to go to the market and sell some of the apples that they had been growing over the past few months. And even though that a lot of ponies in town love the Apple family's apples, and especially during when the sap apple seasons. But this time, when one of the customers walked up to her, asking if they had any good apples, and of course, Granny Smith gave him some apples, and he introduced himself by the name Applecore. He had just recently moved to Ponyville from Trottingham. He was exploring new other ways, places to stay at, and after he came across Ponyville, he fell in love with the place. It was a small community, and it was exactly the kind of place he has been looking for. And she even announced her name was Granny Smith. And for some reason, both of them started to getting along. And then he even asked her if they needed any help at the farm, because he was looking for some extra type of work. And she said that they might need some extra help at the farm though. And she promised to wait for him after that she had closed down the stand for today so that she can introduce Apple Core to her family. And of course, he promised to wait. And now around 4 p.m., when Granny Smith closed down the Apple stand for a day, she was waiting for Apple Core to be showing up. Within a few minutes, he did show up, and they actually went back to the small farm, and there they talked to her parents, and they were actually very happy to have someone else to help them with the farm. Alexis trying to expand the farm with some of the things. And with the next couple of days, Applecore went to the apple farms, and he had us a great time there. He got along with the both parents and even with Granny Smith. For some reason, though, he even thought that she was very beautiful mare, and he hadn't hoped to have the courage enough to maybe ask her out. But there was something about his that he didn't have the courage. He was a little bit afraid to ask her out because he didn't know if she would say yes or if she wouldn't reject him or something like that. But after that, some of his new friends who lives in Ponyville, they told him to be brave enough to maybe try to ask her out on a date. But he was not even sure how to even ask her because he has never asked any pony out before though. But after that, some of his friends managed to encourage him to ask her. So, one afternoon, during the break, when they had taken care of some of the chores at the farm, he actually took the courage and asked her. At first, she was silent because he had no idea if she would say no or yes. But then she just smiled and laughed a little bit, and he thought that was a bad ending of the question. But then she in fact said yes, and she would like to go out with him. Even though there weren't many places to go out to, because the small town was still being built. And but then he suggested that maybe they can just have a picnic together, maybe outside town. And he knows a great spot for that. So she agreed. But the next day, he had packed a small packet in a small bag with some food and some drinks, and they went to the small spot. Even when Granny Smith saw this place, she was very surprised that she had never seen this place. It was a very beautiful spot near a small pond, a small lake just outside town. She had lived in Ponyville for a decade, but never had seen this particular spot. Though she has been quite busy with helping building the farm and even trying to maintain the family's business. But during the picnic, they had a they had a great conversation. They talked about some places they had heard about, and even though that apple core did ask Granny Smith what she felt about Ponyville, or if this place this place had what her family expected to be. And even though that she didn't expect that this small town to be growing up there, she was just happy to have found a place with her family where she can settle down. And even one day hoped to be having a family of her own and to continue the same farm as her parents when they started only about 10 years earlier. Even though that she asked him how things were in Nottingham, because she knows that that is a big city. Even though that he did like to grow up there, but he was looking for adventures, or at least new places to see. He has never left the big city in his whole life, and he wanted to explore the kingdom. And among the first places he came to was in fact Ponyville. After that, the station had just been built there, and the three stations had been connected to some other major cities like Manhattan, Trottingham. And his first destination was in fact Ponyville, and he was going later from there to another place. But after he came to Ponyville for the first time, he almost immediately fell in love with this small community. And it was something about the place that told him, stay here. You will love it. You belong here. And there was something that the same thing for Granny Smith and her parents when they came to Ponyville only 10 years earlier. The one, even though this place was given to them by Princess Celestia, but even that she gave them to this part of the land to them, and even her parents was somehow felt this land was actually calling to them, and they even built a small home, and but they didn't know that during this time, and only 10 years onwards, a small community will be built at a place which they will later known as Ponyville. And they had no idea about that. But Granny Smith was really happy that her family was indirectly involved in that the small town was built on that place. Even Applecore admitted to Granny Smith that he was originally going to stay in Ponyville for only a short time before moving on to the next destination. But it was something about Ponyville that made him want to stay. It was somehow this place telling him to stay. And it was going to be a big future for him. And he decided to stay. And if he did, he would never have met the most beautiful mare he has never seen before. And then he was referring to Granny Smith, which made her smile and laugh a bit. But he even he admits that he had fallen in love with her after the very first time when he saw her at the market. But he was really very shy, but didn't know how to ask her out because he has never been on a date before or been any romantically involved with another mare before. But he was very shy and didn't know how to admit that to her. But it wasn't until his friends when they gave him some advice on what to do and what to say like that. And she was actually very admitted to him that she was really happy that he actually had admitted and took the courage enough to ask her out, even that he was still very shy. But she could see for somehow in his eyes he wasn't even shy anymore. Now, when he had actually had asked her out and admitted and told her, he was now not any more any shy around her. And this was really something about them that made their relationship stronger. Even after all that happened, they continued to see each other as often as they could. And even though that Grant Smith's own father had even admitted and even hired Applecore to work at the farm, her father had a plan to expand the farm, to expand the apple groves in the area. And to do so, they would need some help to help them with that. And Applecore, he actually was really happy that Grant Smith's father had hired him to help. And after nearly about a few months of work at the farm, they had managed to clear out some of the trees in the area and planted some more apple trees. And they had even built a bigger barn where they could store some of the apples, and it was a great time. Despite that the farm was slowly getting bigger, the relationship between Applecore and Grant Smith only grew stronger. There was a lot of more passion, so much love between them. But all that happened. But there was one thing that was almost getting changed. Because one time, one day, when Grant Smith was in the evergreen forest looking for some new apple trees, or at least some other apple kind to bring back to the farm. This was some times after that she had found the sap apples. She wanted to find some other type of apples that they could bring back to the farm. But even though at the same time, Applecore was at the farm helping her father doing some building at the barn. But when Grant Smith hadn't even returned yet, after all, it was still in the late afternoon. The sun was still up, but she was promised that she would be back within an hour or so. But they understood that Grant Smith could be away a little bit longer. But as the sun was going down, the light was almost gone, and now both Grant Smith's parents was getting a little bit worried that the daughter hadn't even returned yet. So Applecore, as he's brave he was and strong, he promised to go look for her, and they would be back within the next an hour or so before the sunlight was gone. Even though that Grant Smith's father wanted to go with them, but he assured himself that he will find her, and they will be back, and she will be safe. Even though that her own mother tried to convince Applecore to bring with her husband, but he assured himself that he will find Grant Smith even if things might be a bit longer. So both will actually luckily go agree on that. So Applecore went to the app's every forest, calling out for Grant Smith a few times, waiting for an answer. But so far, nothing. He tried to repeat the same answer. Granny Smith, where are you? But no answer. As he continued, all the sounds that he heard was some sounds from some animals so far in the deep in the forest, the wind of the trees, and he even could see the sound was getting lower and lower. And he has a very short time before trying to finding her, because he didn't bring anything to make a fire. As he was about almost to leave, when he decided to walk a little bit more and try to look behind some old tree stumps just in case if something, any trace of her, anything behind it. And when he walked over it, he looked down and saw Granny Smith on the ground, unconscious, and in front of her it was two timber wolves, but they didn't see her. Somehow they were looking around in the area after her, apparently, and Applecore quickly hid beneath some of the older tree stumps. But just before they even saw him, and it was luckily that, because as he saw the bolder timber wolves was somehow sniffing in the air and just looking in different directions, and they both ran off. But he didn't want to stay there any much longer. But he decided to wait at least a few more minutes before going to leave the area because he didn't want to be attracted to timber wolves just in case if they were just hiding somewhere. After about 5 minutes, he thought it was long enough for them to have been gone. So he managed to carry out Granny Smith from underneath the tree stumps. He tried to shake her a little bit, tried to wake her up or something, but she didn't wake up. And he didn't know what he couldn't just leave her there, and go back to the farm for her father, because even that if her leaving beneath the tree stumps, the timber wolves could return, and maybe in a bigger number. So he didn't want to risk that. So he carried her on his own back and walked as fast as he could out of the forest. But as he was doing that, he could almost hear in the far distance the timber wolves was howling, and he thought they had found his scent and was tracking him. He stopped, but he could still hear the timber wolves in the far distance. But they didn't even come closer, and he was then felt lucky enough. He then could start working fast again out to the forest and managed to get back to the farm just as the sun had set beyond the tree horizon. And both Grandsmith's parents were terrified, seeing the daughter on Applecore's back, believing she was very, very injured. But luckily, she didn't. All she had was a light, minor concussion and a sprained hoof. That was all that she had. Apparently, she has been standing above those tree stumps looking for some apple trees. And she lost her grip and fell to the ground, but her head first, and lost consciousness and somehow was rolling under beneath the tree stumps. And it was exactly where Applecore found her, because he thought that she had been injured by the timber wolves and that she had somehow dragged herself beneath those tree stumps and hide from them and fell asleep or something. But it turns out about the opposite. But she was really happy that he had gone into the forest looking for her, because if he had even done it, it might be possible that the timber wolves would have found her and she would never been found alive. Both Grandsmith's parents was really happy and proud that he'd done so much, even though that he was a bit scolded about her from her father, saying if he had not gone with her, would go with, been going with him to try to find Grandsmith, they would never probably bring back. But Grandsmith told her father that she admits she was really happy that Apple Core did went into the forest alone, even if it was dangerous, because doing that, showing so much passion, so much love for her, and for that, she couldn't even stop loving him for that. It took her about a week or two before having been fully recovered from all this event. Soon enough, almost the entire town was aware of what he did to save Grant Smith from the Timberwolves. Police though first thought maybe there was some made up story, but they actually do know that the Apple family never lies. And especially Granny Smith, who has so many friends in town and has never lied to any of them, they realized that what they had been told was the truth all along. And for that, they respected Applecore from has saved Granny Smith from a danger, even though without knowing that without knowing that Granny Smith might have been in severe danger and even risk his own life to save her. And from that moment, Granny Smith did knew Applecore was in fact her true love and her soulmate. And after they had been dating for past 4 years, Applecore thought maybe it was time to settle down with Granny Smith and start a family with her because he felt ready to do so. But there was one thing he needed to do first. He actually told both her parents about this idea, and they were actually very supportive. And they were actually wanted to help him how to make this proposal go as planned. And they thought maybe doing so at the meadow just closer to the farm. And when Grant Smith was taken there by Applecore, he actually did went on a knee and proposed to her, and there was silent for only a few seconds. Despite that it felt like hours. But she said yes, and both was really happy. And even though that her parents was already know about it, they pretended they were so overjoyed. But Granny Smith somehow could sense they already knew about this proposal, but get along with it. And a few months later, they had their wedding at the farm though. And even though there were a lot of things they wanted to do on their honeymoon, but they decided to go to a small place nearby and rented a cabin for about a week. And they had such a great time there, watching the sunsets together and just having a great time. And then, only about 2 years later, Granny Smith told Applecore that they were going to be parents. And Applecore, he couldn't be happier. He was really overjoyed that he was going to be a father to a boy. And they had even decided to name him Bright Mac. And a few months later, their boy was born. And even Grant Smith was so overjoyed seeing her own son in her own hooves. Even Applecore, he was always looking forward to be a parent, to have our own family. And now both his dreams have come true. Married with his true love and having a son with her, his life was now complete. He loved his family. And after all this time, he was really happy to have started this family and that he was really even happy that he had decided years earlier when he first came to Ponyville to stay there. If he had even stayed, he would never have met Granny Smith and fell in love with her, and he never had this amazing family with her. And even that Granny Smith even admits herself, she was really happy that she met Applecore at the market and that he also had decided to stay in Ponyville. If he didn't, she would never have found her true love. And for that, she was very grateful that Applecore had decided those years earlier to stay in Ponyville. It was the perfect moment that made both of them really happy. Granny Smith and Applecore couldn't have been happier to be with the one they loved the most of all, and especially having a son together. And from that, both of them love each other so deeply. And this is how Granny Smith and Applecore, for their true love, are gonna family together. The end.